with God. I was angry with him for two things. I was angry because of the Holocaust. I was furious about the Holocaust. And I was angry because I'd become a nihilist. I don't know if you're familiar with the philosophy. It's such a cruel philosophy. And essentially, I believed that everything in my life was pointless. It meant nothing, no matter what I would do. It was just like a voice went off in my head that said, doesn't mean anything, doesn't matter, you don't mean anything, you don't matter. And I got so angry with God one day that I literally, I screamed at him. I shook my fist at the ceiling and I said, how dare you? How dare you do this to me?
Yeah.
Then I had this thought. Now, no bells, no flashing lights. But this thought was as clear as a voice. And the thought was, so you're angry, huh, Avi? Well, who are you angry at? I thought you said you were an atheist.
Wow.
So I thought for a second, and then I thought back. I am an atheist. Why should I believe in a God who creates a pointless universe and puts me in the middle of it? Thought comes back to me. If you're going to hold me accountable, first admit I exist. The scripture sums up the existence of someone like me. Scripture says, there's a way which seems right to a man, but the end is the way of death. And there's another scripture that's a challenge for people like me. The challenge was, you will seek me and you will find me when you search for me with all your heart, and I will be found by you. So I decided to put aside the anger and to start searching. And by God's grace and his mercy, he brought two types of people into my life. He brought Jews for Jesus across my path. In 1975, there was a young man wearing a Jews for Jesus shirt, said Jews for Jesus. He's handing out broadsides, tracts. And my friend says, look. And I froze. And I turned to my friend and I said, someone should tell this idiot that you cannot be Jewish and believe in Jesus. And my friend said, tell him yourself. And she went over and she took the tract and she put it in my hand. The title of the tract was, Jews should not believe in Jesus unless. And inside there was a whole list of prophecies from the Hebrew scriptures.
Right.
So I was very angry, but I kept the tract. And then through that encounter with Jews for Jesus, and because God brought into my life a Christian family that loved me enough to want me to know the truth, I started to examine the scriptures with an open mind. And finally, I came to the conclusion that if the Bible is true, then Jesus has to be who he said he was. And I didn't want to deal with that.
Right.
Because I knew there would be consequences. And then one night, I'm driving home and I get another discernible thought. And the thought was, what are you doing tonight when you get home, Avi? I thought back, nothing much. And the thought came to me, well, look, you know it's true.
Wow.
Why don't you give your heart to Jesus? I thought back, okay, but I think I'll make a sandwich and drink a cup of tea first. And that's what I did. I got home, I made a sandwich, drank a cup of tea, and I prayed. And nothing happened.
Okay.
And I was furious. The ceiling was supposed to open up, and everything was supposed to be, there was supposed to be a finger that wrote across the wall, good for you, Avi, you gave your life to Yeshua. Nothing happened. Right? So I prayed again. Second time I prayed, all I could say over and over again was, I'm so sorry.
There it is.
So sorry.
There it is. It reminds me of when God called out to Adam, where are you? As if God didn't know where he was.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
He needs your heart. And then along comes with it this wonderful intellectual understanding of who Jesus is.
Yeah.
How did putting your faith in Jesus change you? As a Jew, not just as a Jewish man, but from the inside, God promised us a new heart and to put his spirit in us. What did that do to you?
It changed everything. It was a process, of course.
Yes.
But if I were to sum everything up, I would sum it up with these words. Before having a real relationship with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is what I have now, Before that, I had a great philosophy that didn't help me tie my shoes.
Yeah.
That was of absolutely no use, that did nothing except remind me every day of my life, every moment of my life, that my life was pointless and purposeless. Now, instead of anger, I have answers.
Oh, wow.
Now, instead of fury, I have purpose. David wrote, he said, goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. Not pointlessness, not emptiness. Goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. And when I die, what?
I'll dwell
Pointlessness?
in the house.
No, I'll dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Yeah. Well, that's a hope that really gives us a peace in the midst of trials. You've been through a lot of trials, you know. It changed you. It gave you hope and purpose. But what would you tell someone that's watching that says, oh, I find hope in, other things. I make my own hope.
Yeah.
I like my job and I like where I live, and that gives me purpose. What do you tell that person?
I tell people, but the issue isn't whether or not you find hope in this or that. The issue isn't whether or not you find answers in this or that. The issue is whether or not what you have is true.
Right.
Not whether you like it, not whether you're comfortable.
Great point.
But whether it's true.
Great point. Great point. I say that a lot to people because us as Jewish believers, we actually had to surrender our way, the way that we thought was right, which you say the Bible talks about how there's a way that looks right to a man, but at the end leads to death. We have to be able to surrender that way to God's way, to say, okay, your way. And that's why when people come to me and they say, well, Jeff, you have your way. I say, it's not my way. I had to lay down my way so that I could follow God's way. And, in Jeremiah, it talks about when you trust in God's strength, he'll plant you by streams of living water that will give you life year round, no matter what. And that's a reality that happens to believers like us. But you're not just any believer, you're a Jewish believer. And there are people around the world watching this right now, and a lot of Jewish people are coming to faith right now because they're bold enough to look online. They're bold enough to open the New Testament on their own and see for themselves instead of listening to 2,000 years of tradition being passed down from generation. Why do you believe what you believe? Why do you not believe in Jesus? Because my mom told me. Why does she not believe it? Because her mom told her not to. But you're an author. You've written on this topic. What do you want to share with the Jewish world right now?
You know the name Mengele, right? Dr. Mengele? Do you know who Mengele was?
No.
Okay. He was the monster of Auschwitz.
Yes.
Okay. He was the guy that stood when the trains came in and the people got off the trains. He was the one that pointed to the right or to the left. He was a doctor. Okay. He performed monstrous experiments, especially on children, especially on twin children. Never anesthesia.
Right.
He just loved torturing them in the name of medical science. Okay. They never caught him. He was never brought to trial. All right. What if I'm dying of a disease?
Yeah.
All right. You have the cure. There's only one cure. You have the cure. You can take me to the person who has the cure. Without the cure, I die. With the cure, I will live. It's a guaranteed cure. And you say, Avi, come with me. And I say to you, I can't do that. And you say, why not? And I said, I don't go to doctors. You say, why not? I said, because of Mengele.
Yeah.
What would you say to me?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
You would say, Avi, you don't condemn medical science for what Mengele did. You condemn Mengele for what Mengele did.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. And we like to say that people do horrible things in the name of all kinds of things.
Right.
They do horrible things in the name of peace, in the name of tolerance, in the name of communism, in the name of everything.
Right.
But
not in the name of your mother.
but that's the point. And it's a great point to make that what does it have to do with Jesus?
Right.
What does that have to do with Jesus?
Right.
It has everything to do with wicked human beings. Absolutely.
And if anything, the fact that it has to do with wicked human beings substantiates the fact that the biblical claims are true.
Wow. That's incredible. So, Avi, what are you've had a really long career within Jews for Jesus.
I have.
What have been some of the most challenging experiences you've faced as a Jewish believer working in this ministry?
I'm really grateful to God for having given me the opportunity to do the crazy things that I've done.
Yeah.
My wife Ruth and I guess you could say, I hope this doesn't sound pretentious, we're pioneers. We go into the places where nothing exists. We went into the Soviet Union when it was still the Soviet Union. That was very challenging. We didn't even speak Russian when we went. That was very, very challenging. We went into Germany. I remember when we first started sending teams into Germany in the mid-90s from Russia and Ukraine. We'd stand on the streets wearing our shirts that said in German, Juden für Jesus, Jews for Jesus, handing out our literature. And Germans would literally stop and freeze and stare. They couldn't fathom that there were Jews in Germany talking about Jesus. And to go up and to talk with them was the easiest thing in the world. For the last several years, last 4 or 5 years, I've mobilized teams to go into Poland. I have friends to this day. I have believers who are friends who say to me, you know, how could you go to Poland? How could you go to Germany? When we first started sending teams into Germany, a friend of mine who was a colleague, good friend, came over to me. He said, I don't get it. I said, you don't get what? He said, how could you do this? I said, how could I do what? He said, how could you send teams to Germany? Have you forgotten?
Yeah.
I said, I haven't forgotten anything. So he said, how could you do this? And I said, well, if I don't have a burden as a Jew and as a believer in Jesus, if I don't have a burden for countries like Germany, Poland, and Romania, and all these places, if I don't have a burden for these countries, then maybe the gospel isn't real. He said, what does that mean? And I had one of those moments where I knew I was going to say the right thing. You remember these, right? Because there's so few. I looked at him. I said, Jesus didn't die for me because I was his friend. He died for me because I was his enemy. I feel that we Jews have a moral obligation to come back, especially to the places where our history has been so horrendous. We have a moral obligation to come back to the countries where we died, proclaiming God's message of life. That's life from the dead.
That's right.
And that reality, that fact, is stronger than any challenge I'll ever face.
Avi Snyder, what are you doing today?
Just being popular and... What am I doing today? I'm writing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm 73 years old.
Yeah.
I don't know how many more years the Lord will give me. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up.
Well, if you're watching and you like to read books, I recommend Avi Snyder's book, Jews Don't Need Jesus.
And other misconceptions.
I'm going to link that down in the description. You could check it out there.
There's another book they could read, which is called Never Ashamed.
Never Ashamed. Yeah. So I'll link his books down in the description. You can check those out. Avi, you've blessed me with your ministry, and you've been a wonderful influence. And thank you for representing our people so well. Thank you for sharing the gospel for so many years, and being a true believer. You know, despite the consequences, right? Because you know,
consequences have been good.
Yeah. Oh, the consequence. You know what? It's a good perspective, because a lot of people, when they come to faith, a lot of Jewish people, they're like, oh, what am I going to have to give up? But the life that you gain and what you gain. Thank you for making that point.
Well, thank you.
Avi.
Thank you for talking to me.
And thank you for watching this video. If you like this kind of content, don't forget to like the video, leave a comment for me, for Avi, for anyone. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. God bless you, Avi.
God bless you.
Thank you, brother.